Hi, a very good morning to all of you and a happy Easter. It's probably the first Easter since Christ's resurrection, if that ever happened, that people are actually joining congregations online. The world has suddenly changed and changed beyond measure. This is biggest story. This is our generation's and humanity's biggest story that we are all witnessing, and it's unfolding every moment, every day. It is every day is going to be the first ever in case of what's happening across the world. And so let's start with a happy Easter. Uh, and there's a Jewish saying, "What is truer than truth?" And the answer to that is the story. I had released a video last evening. Some of you may have listened or seen it. And out there, I said, at the heart of every issue, there is a human element, which leads to the three most beautiful words in any language: what happened next? And if you know the answer to that, then you are a storyteller. Now, there may be some students of mine in the group today, and they would probably be tired of listening to this word. And ever since they joined the school in their first semester, the one word that I almost drill into them is to tell me a compelling story. And I'm sure over the last 20 days now that the nation has been under a lockdown along with the rest of the world. Um, all of us have had several stories in us to tell. There's a friend of mine called Siddharth Gigu, who's a Kashmiri writer, who's actually already released a book yesterday talking about love in the time of quarantine, taking off from Milan Kundera's book of Love in the Time of Cholera. There was, it reminds me that in 2012, oh, by the way, let me introduce myself. So I am Kishaloy Bhattacharjee, and currently I am a professor and the vice dean of the Jindal School of Journalism and Communication. But I still like to introduce myself as a journalist, as a reporter, because that's what I have done for a very long time. And when you say very long time, it's longer than any of you in this group today probably have walked this earth. So quarter of a century I have reported, and for the most part of that I have reported from a network which was India's biggest network, called New Delhi Television, or NDTV. I reported from the borders, from the margins, from what is called the conflict zones or the disturbed areas. And for me, it was about covering as much ground as I could, getting as many stories as I could, to be able to give voice to the voiceless. So I'm reminded from my days from one of the last report that I ever did for NDTV, and then I kind of hung my boots, was a story that actually was a doctored video that came on Twitter. Twitter was new then. We were all new to social media. And this video came to me, and this video was leaked on Twitter. And, this video was of a woman being tortured in a particular place. It was difficult to understand. And there was a riot going on in Lower Assam, and I was covering that. And this video leaked. And what happened? What happened was there were large exodus from Bombay, Pune, Bangalore, of people living in the Northeast going back, because there was a rumor that people from that area are now going to be targeted because of this video. No one knew it was doctored. And then came the term called information warfare. And we understood that the information warfare is going to be a much more potent means of waging a war than any other war. And then 2020 happened. And after 8 years, we realized, and the governments have suddenly woken up to this new realization that there can be a bio war. And if there's an information and a bio war together, imagine what's going to happen. It's basically brought, the COVID is not a bio war, though there are conspiracy theories, but already governments are gearing up on the possibility in the future of this kind of a virus leaking out or spreading out. I mean, it can lock down the entire world. This is the biggest story. So, you know, we have a good number of people already attending the webinar. Are you all, you know, interested in listening to more stories? Because I will bring in, and I'll try and listen to your stories as well. But is there a way to? Is there something called a poll? So can I take a quick poll to see that how many of you are storytellers here? How many of you out here like telling stories? Can I do a quick poll? All right, I can see some hands going up. Ashish and Chinky, who are my colleagues also out here online. Ashish, can you help get a poll done to figure out how many of us
we have not created a poll, but we can ask viewers to raise their hand.
Okay, thanks, Ashish. Yeah, I can see some people raising their hands. So here we go. Yeah, a lot of people are storytellers out here. And you know, yesterday I was reading the New Yorker, and there's this lovely. You know, how many of you out here read New Yorker? You must read New Yorker. It's one of the best long format magazines that we have. And there is a story yesterday in yesterday's New Yorker saying, "Dear Diary, the world is suddenly dark." So there's this woman who's actually addressing to the diary, and the story starts by the invocation of the famous diary, which I'm sure all of you have read, the diary of Anne Frank. Now, if Anne Frank had not written that diary, if Anne Frank's story was not told, a lot about what happened during the Holocaust would not have been known to the rest of the world. Anne Frank's diary became a vehicle for the entire world through generations to know of what happened, the barbaric, you know, times during the Nazi Germany. I mean, those are the, it came out so eloquently through Anne Frank's diary. And today we are all locked down under different conditions. People are writing diaries, people are writing stories, and I hope that, you know, all of you will be able to tell these stories. Also remember, you know, I told you that the three most important words that in any language, what happens next? And if you know the answer, then you're a storyteller. A storyteller wants to know what happens next and then shares those stories. As a journalist, what do? We go to the ground, we listen to people, we observe, and then we come and share the story. We tell the story in a way that it has an impact. It doesn't always have an impact, but we try and make an impact. Stories are the only connecting fiber in this of humanity. Stories connect us. You know, when you were a little kid, for the first time, when you were in your guardian's parents' lap, you heard a story. That's the first thing that you hear, and that stays with you. Your brains, our brains are connected through stories. We pick stories up like this. There's a beautiful saying by Ben Okri. Ben Okri is a very important novelist, and he says, "Beware of the stories that you hear or tell. Subtly at night, beneath the waters of consciousness, they are altering your world." Stories change us. Stories have the capacity to change us. You know, I grew up in an era where we had this naive idealism that we can change the world. And I hope that you young people listening out here also have the same kind of idealism. Yes, you can change the world. You can change the world not by changing the entire world together, but by being able to tell compelling stories and making a difference. And that's why people, you know, become journalists. There are people who study different kinds of, you know, discipline and then become journalists. I mean, for example, the editor in chief of Indian Express, India's leading daily, Raj Kamal Jha, is an engineer from the IIT Kharagpur. I mean, I had a friend who was a deep sea diver. I mean, we have people from all over the world, all kinds of disciplines joining journalism, because of the kind sense of adventure. There's an adrenaline rush that's there. But I think the more important part is that to be able to make a difference, to be able to make a difference with telling stories in a way that it will make a difference. Now, I spent quarter of a century, I told you, crossing over borders, bringing stories from the margins, and but I wish I could cover more ground. I mean, I had a huge area, and my logistical challenges were very high. Today, those logistical challenges are better. And that's why today I teach. I teach young minds who are far more determined, who are far more able technologically to be humanities foot soldiers. I mean, I call my students humanities foot soldiers. So, the situation in which we are in, I mean, we are all talking about how to cope, how we should cope. Some people are lucky enough not to be unwell or not to be a caregiver. A caregiver during this time is going through a lot of trouble. We are looking at all aspects. The newspapers, as it started, the media and the newspapers, when the lockdown started, went on talking about all the problems and genuine problems. And then suddenly a story broke. Which story? And I'd like to share, a story with you. This story, the story of 90 kilometers with migrant hope. Now, this is a story that I'm sharing. This is by Bandeep Singh, who is the India Today group editor. And he talks about jottings while shooting the Exodus. And he says, my first impression is how fast they walk, frictionless, pulled towards the direction of their home, towards a sliver of hope, towards even a rumor that there will be a bus. Kids walk faster. And you know what I'm talking about, right? We are talking about suddenly, as the lockdown happened, hundreds and thousands of people from all over the country started walking because there was no bus, there was no train. They can't afford an aeroplane, and aeroplanes were off the sky as well. So what would they do? They just started walking. Who were they? Kids walk faster to keep pace with their parents, mothers with their kids on waists, sacks on their heads, walking with their mouths covered by their sari pallus. I notice they don't fall back in the group. None is out of breath. Families walk in groups formed by their destinations. There is no leader, no instructions, yet they stop, rest, and then get up to walk all at once, wordlessly, like a synchronic movement of a shoal of fish. The sky is blue, the light is golden, air crisp as water. The senses hungrily want to delight in it all. But the relentless line of migrants cuts the idyll like a hacksaw blade, a bleeding irony. And then Bandeep shows us pictures. This is the silhouette of a woman, the sacks on the head, the migrant laborers, the gleaming high-rise building on the expressway. So this is an expressway that many of you people who live in Delhi NCR are familiar with. They're not far from your home, these people. Look at the next picture. I think this is a searing picture. Look at the person in the background. Further ahead is a group of 5, one of them with a polio leg. Remember, this is a photographer, Bandeep Singh, taking pictures of these migrant workers traveling from kilometers. I mean, this is a 90-kilometer stretch that he made, but people have actually walked, I know, for 240 kilometers. 240 kilometers walking in midday sun. It's a hot country. And then Bandeep asks, how far do you aim to go like this? And these boys, they say, till Agra. And then he says, पर क्यों? And then they say, यहाँ क्या करेंगे? सब पैसे भी खत्म हो गए. I follow them for 5 minutes and want to help. So they say that, the photographer says that, why are you leaving? And they say that, what are we going to do out here? We've run out of money. And then Bandeep offers them a 500 rupee note. They all stop, slowly surround me, two of them with folded hands. And it's very chilling to listen to this. These are workers who run out of money. They're walking for 90 kilometers to reach home, to be able to survive. Someone offers them money, then they say, इसकी जरूरत नहीं है. Please ये मत दीजिए, अपने पूछ लिया, यही काफी है. So please don't offer us the money. That you've asked us is more than enough. As they walk and he limps past, I feel a deep embarrassment for not being able to do more than offer some money. I get into the chat with the driver to cover it up. There's the next picture. Pictures, tell stories. Pictures are very powerful storytellers. And out here on the road is this young kid, more middle class in appearance, resting on his backpack, his younger sisters on the edge of the pavement. As I bend to take this picture, his body reflexes to get up, but is pinned down by fatigue. He averts his gaze from the camera as if to blank me out. We have walked to Noida about 18 kilometers, all the way from Srinivaspuri, where we were evicted out by the landlord. Now remember, everyone attending this, we are sitting in the comfort of our homes. Most of us, at least. We have an air conditioning, we have fans, we have food, which we are rationing perhaps. And here are people who are evicted by their owners, by their landlords. They're on the road, they've lost their jobs, they don't know what to do, even when the lockdown is relaxed. There is no future, and yet they are walking. They are not breaking down, they're walking. And just that story really conveys so many moods and so many feelings about the situation. There is hope and there is hopelessness. And as the car passes them by, eyes turn towards it, linger for a moment, and turn back. I fear slowing down. I fear giving hope. I meet the same woman I met a couple of hours ago walking on the expressway. The resolute expression has given way to worry lines by now. I don't see her child. Where is the little one? I gesture. She points to her lap, where she is shielding him from the cold under the skin of her sari, the pallu of which she's using as her mask. I can't photograph. Light is too low, about to give up. I see a car approaching, position my camera, waiting for the headlight beam to light up the face. This picture particularly, interested me when it was first published. I mean, look at the set of eyes, silence. They wipe away every word, every filter of the mind. Because nothing you can say matters anymore. You press the shutter, release the button, diminished, humbled by the awe of the unspoken. Just listen to the gaze. The gaze of this little child, the gaze of the father. That itself is a story. It is a searing statement of what we've done to 400 million people. India has more than 400 million migrant workers. It's not a term that I like. Migrant workers mean they're workers. They're basically working away from their home in some other place. But look again, pause, take back these eyes. This gaze is what you should be able to take back with you after this webinar. And maybe go back and write something. This is real. In the middle of a collapsing world, a young kid is resting on his bag, wearing his headphones and metallic sunglasses, even as the others are desperate for a ride home, youthful abandon, or a resident millennial of a virtual island, surreal India. On the flyover, resting against concrete wall as his family waits for a ride, a kid steps up from the camera and flashes a V sign. His brother wants to do something similar. He looks fleetingly at the camera, but is old enough to know the grim situation. A lone family, exhausted by walk and waiting. Far away, far out on the empty expressway, they look as if stranded in deep waters. Agra, where they are headed, is distant and beyond the looming night. We have nothing to offer them except digested biscuits. Won't it make them more thirsty? Think as I hand over a biscuit. In the middle of a large group, their sacks, buckets, backpacks, bobbing up and down as they walk, a young infant, not imperfectly balanced on an arm of his mother, breaks into smiles, looking at the shadows that look like sack-shaped heads with bodies. Now look at this man. He's taken his shoes off. He's walking bare feet. How many of you out here will be able to walk bare feet on an asphalt road? I find it difficult. I've walked many more kilometers because of the kind of terrain that I covered, because of the kind of work that I did. And I did it because I had to, but it was always very difficult. Soon I realized that the biggest discomfort is not the fatigue of walking so much, but the shoe or the slipper not meant to be walked so much in. It's dark now. We wind our way to Pari Chowk in Greater Noida, a group of 3 families sitting on the road. Imagine middle of the night, people are sitting on the road. They're trying to reach home because home seems to be the safest zone. They don't know whether they are going to be infected, whether they're going to survive, be alive, what is going to happen tomorrow. They don't know. There is no tomorrow. They just need to walk. You just keep walking. And then, Bandeep, this is a post on Bandeep's Facebook, which is public, so you can go and actually read it if you're interested. And of course, there have been so many other stories of the migrants. Now, why I am showing you this story? Because over the last 20 days, you heard, if not seen, and many of you would have seen stories such as this. What is the meaning? Why am I telling you this story? Is because this story, when it was being broadcast or printed or written or being told, being shared by people, journalists, are, like I told you, foot soldiers of humanity. They went out taking the risk to be able to bring back the story. And what happened? It forced the government to act. These 400 million people were just left alone. It took about 48 hours, but the government started reacting. The government started feeding them. The government started, there were different draconian measures they did that were critiqued, but overall, there was a sense that, okay, these people need help, and help came. Help came in many places. I know of a MLA in Jharkhand who instructed his office that every rupee of his MLA fund should be given to all migrant workers. Every migrant worker bank account should have at least 5,000 rupees or whatever amount he said. And he made sure, and I'm sure there are lots of other people who also did this. So there are people there, and these stories need to be told. If stories are not told, then society's problems are not going to be identified. If they're not identified, then they're not going to be solved. And who does that? Journalists do that. Journalists do that because they speak truth to power. Because journalists are the only ones who can question the status quo. That is a responsibility, a journalistic responsibility that we bear. And we bear it like a cross all our life. We cannot go wrong. We cannot afford to go wrong. We don't retract. And I know the questions that you will probably ask, if you do, is that what's happening to the state of journalism right now? Yes, there are problems, and I'm embarrassed about it. I'm embarrassed about the state of journalism, just as I'm embarrassed about the state of humanity everywhere. But we'll come to that later. while I was thinking about telling you the story of these migrant workers, the other story that, came to my mind about someone walking is the next slide that I'm showing you. And some of you may remember, some of you may not remember. But this is the story of Dona Mati. Anyone remembers Dona Mati? Dona Mati was an Adivasi tribal person in Orissa. And his wife died. And those areas do not have hospitals. That's a area that I have covered as a reporter, but I've covered it more because of the Maoist problems. And there is no health. There are no health centers there. There are no schools don't operate out there. Anganwadi centers don't work out there. So Dona Mati's wife died, and Dona Mati tried to cremate her. What happens? Dona Mati actually walks 12 kilometers after the hospital where she died allegedly failed to provide an ambulance to carry the body back to their village. Among 42 died from tuberculosis in the district hospital in Bhawanipatna town in Orissa. And then his village was 60 kilometers away, but he couldn't afford a vehicle. So Dana with his daughter started walking. There's a journalist who picked the story up and published the story. What happens? Everyone rushes to help because the government is embarrassed. Healthcare workers are embarrassed. The hospital is embarrassed. And not just Dana. In the next couple of months, every now and then, I remember seeing a story of someone carrying their near and dear ones. They're carrying dead bodies of the near and dear ones, walking back to their village because there was no vehicle available to take the dead back to their home. So there are impact. Impact happens. Impact happens unknowingly. Just like I told you, the Ben Okri's lines that below the level of consciousness, stories change you. They alter your lives. So without knowing, the stories that you tell alter other people's lives. Dana Mati could not save his wife, but many other people probably have been saved after Dana Mati's story was brought into focus. And I'll probably end with a happier story. I've told you stories of migrants walking. I've told you a story of Dana Mati walking with his dead wife on his shoulder. Now, in 2010, 11, I was that time covering the northeastern part of India. Not a word that fits very comfortably with me because I don't think so. There is one northeast. There are 8 states out there, very different, but we tend to call them as northeast. So I'm using that word. And I was, it was flooding, and I had gone to this Kaziranga National Park, which I'm sure all of you know, and I keep going there. It's one of the best national parks, wildlife reserves in the world, and has a wonderful history from just about a couple of when rhinoceros left. Today it has the world's largest one-horn rhino population, which is a huge conservation story. It is also a World Heritage Site because of various reasons. Now out there, in my free time, all day, there is nothing much to do. After the story I reported the story. I was doing reporting on how animals were being poached while they were fleeing the flood. And I run into, a village man. His name is Jada Paya. And I stumble into a story. Now the locals know the story. They don't find it so unusual, but to me it was an unusual story. An unusual story of a man who spent 30 years planting a few trees every day on a sandbank of the Brahmaputra and raises a forest of 1,000 hectares where the animals come back and the birds come back and the beasts come back. Why did he do that? He's a villager. He's a common villager on the Majuli Island on one of the chaporis, which are the sandbanks. And one day, sitting under the hot sun, he saw a large number of cobra babies die because of the heat. And he told himself that, if there was a tree out here under the shade, the snakes wouldn't have died. And he started planting trees. And for 30 years, every day he planted trees. And he made it reserve forest. One man planting trees for 30 years turns an arid area, a sandbank, into a reserve forest of 1,000 hectares. Jadhav Payang was given the award of the Padma Shri a couple of years back. But not just that, with the story of Jadhav Payang, many such people who are planting trees around the country, around the world, came to our, people started reporting these stories. And while people started reporting the stories, that kind of impact started showing. So, I will not tell any more stories because, I have spent a considerable number of years on the ground and have collected stories. And, there's this famous song, an American civil rights movement song called "Not All Revolutions Will Be Televised." And I used that line when I wrote my first book, saying that not all revolutions will be televised, but every story must be told. So, ladies and gentlemen, people who are attending this, remember, tell stories, because stories tend to change lives. Stories make a difference. Stories are important. We are storytellers. We are natural storytellers. That's the first thing that you have heard as a little child. And that will be the last thing, probably. You will go through life listening to, observing, telling stories, sharing stories. And that's what we do in journalism school. I am not very sure, but I will ask whether amongst the attendees there is a student of mine called Arvind Kumar. Is Arvind out here? If Arvind is here, can you please raise your hand? And if Arvind is not here, then is Ashima Sharma here? Is there a way of finding out if Ashima Sharma or
Ashima is here. Ashima is here.
Ashima, okay, Ashima, let me just introduce Ashima, and then I'm unmuting Ashima out here. Ashish, can you please check whether
I have unmuted her. I have unmuted
Ashima. Is a third year journalism student at the Jindal School of Journalism and Communication, where I teach. And she came from a commerce background. She was at that point of time very confident, and I'm sure she's still very confident of becoming a journalist. She always wanted to be a journalist. So I want to hear from her why she wanted to be a journalist. But why I want to tell, why I want her to share her story is that she's going to graduate this time. It's unfortunate that we are not physically with our graduating batch as they graduate. We are virtually with them, but we adapt. Journalists need to adapt. Journalism students need to adapt. And I think this is perhaps the biggest classroom for them, the best course that they have been offered is to be able to cope with what's going on. So what Ashima did over the last couple of semesters was actually turn her focus after, into following migration and refugees, and a particular group of refugees she followed. And she also started one of the most potent and effective means of storytelling in today's world, which comes from a tradition of my generation. And she has a podcast called The Hook. So you can actually, switch into Hook, onto the Hook, and listen to what she does. She breaks down stories. So that's something that she has done. And I don't know whether she has done one on the COVID. Probably she's planning to. But Ashima, can you tell us your story with the migrants, with the refugees?
Hi. So since you're talking about walking, these are the refugees that you're talking about are the Rohingyas who have walked across two borders to India, one from Myanmar to Bangladesh, and then from Bangladesh to India. And yes, I did talk to them about COVID again for an assignment, but
I think is Ashima speaking, because I can't hear Ashima. So
No,
if
her
Ashima
voice is not audible.
hello? Yeah.
Yeah, Ashima.
Yeah. So, yes, as far as the coverage for coronavirus is concerned, we did go about doing that for an assignment. And the thing with the refugees is, in the conditions that they live, social distancing is a great, great privilege. They don't even have proper means to wash hands and, sanitize themselves, let alone proper provisions for food. So, yes, I did talk to a number of them, who complained that they don't even have proper food or ration enough to sustain them for a few days. And, these are not even the people who can avail any privileges of the government, because India primarily does not have a policy towards the refugees.
Well, Ashima, I mean, can you also tell, because there are other students who are listening to you, that, your interest towards refugee and migration, and also let me tell the audience out here that Ashima has she is one of our toppers, who has maintained consistently an outstanding grade, and she has been accepted into the graduate school by the London School of Economics and by the School of Oriental and African Studies in London. I think Ashima is accepting the offer made by the London School of Economics. She wants to study human rights, migration, forced migration, and refugee studies. But Ashima, can you give a sense of what this program at JSJC had did to you, and how you got interested in this particular area, and what do you think overall, if you can tell us briefly of this particular program, because there are young people who are listening to you. I mean, how did you make a choice? You were a commerce student, you made a choice to come out here, and what are you taking away with you?
Sure. So I always wanted to be a journalist. I don't know whether there's a reason to it or no. It was a decision that I made, and I ended up joining the journalism school at Jindal because my parents were absolutely uh, very impressed by the faculty by after a seminar that we attended. And after I joined, I also interacted with my friends across other journalism schools in Bombay and in Bangalore. And the primary difference that we have here is that we are not learning out of textbooks. These are not the courses that my uh, peers in other journalism schools are being offered at all. They're studying it off the textbooks. They're studying it in a very conventional manner. Gender and sexuality or reporting conflict and crisis is probably not something that they will ever get to do in a course of journalism there. And talking about how my interest was shaped is, um, I was taking this course called Reporting Conflict and Crisis, which was followed by another course in the second semester called Reporting the Border, in which we talked for the first time about migration and refugees. And that course also um, had a requirement of fulfilling an assignment where we had to visit the refugee camps, and that was my first interaction with the refugees. And I think that was the turning point. Like post that assignment, I've almost visited that camp once in 2 months or once in 3 months, and I've been connected with those people. And I make sure that every story that I have to pitch in subsequent assignments is related to that, because uh, and that primarily became my focus over the next few semesters, and it culminated into me going and applying for human rights in LSE.
Oh, thank you. So much, Ashima. I wish Arvind was out here. Our other student from third year, from the graduating batch, also someone who is interested. In fact, I remember Arvind when he came in the first semester. The first thing he told me is that when I was asking everyone who wants to be what, and when Ashima said that she wants to be a journalist, Arvind said, "I want to be a politician," and I was like taken aback. And I said, "Oh, this sounds interesting." Because you don't find young people coming up and saying that I want to be a politician. And he wanted to do public, he wanted to understand, do a course in journalism, and now he's going for his master's in public policy. He's got an offer from the University of London and a few other universities, but I think he's taking the University of London offer, going out there. But Arvind would have joined us today, but Arvind, over the COVID crisis, he's a Calcutta boy, has done something incredible, and I'm very proud of that. That's why I'd like to share that with you. He launched something called Bicycle Warriors. And what do Bicycle Warriors do? So Arvind wears his mask, puts his goggles, carries bags and sanitizers, and he is off to all day delivering food and medicines to senior citizens. So this is a service that he launched with permission of the Calcutta Police, of offering help to senior citizens. How did he do this? He attended the course on reporting conflict and crisis, and it was not like we were preparing them for this crisis. No one knew about this crisis, but the crisis is there in front of us, and I think some of the students figured out that they need to adapt, and Arvind adapted very well. Ashima would have probably told you a little more about the podcast that she does, but in the podcast, please go tune into that podcast called The Hook, where she breaks down important concepts. Say, for example, the concept of citizenship. Citizenship was the biggest issue before COVID came in, and that was across the country. She was breaking that down, making it simple, because otherwise what happens is that information these days breaks every millisecond, and our brain is just bursting with information. We don't know what information to absorb and what information to kind of filter out. She helps in her own way to do that. I also see another student of ours, Aditi Roy, out here. Instead of asking Aditi to speak, let me tell you Aditi's story. Aditi, after the super cyclone in Odisha, she comes from there, visited a village out there, and that village was a village of artists. What happened? Their entire art, their livelihood was completely gone. And it was sad, it was unfortunate, but it was a story. Now, it was a remote area, not covered very well. Not many journalists went out there, but our first semester student during her summer break did make an effort, go out there, bring back a story. Stories matter. Like I said, stories matter, because without those stories, livelihood of those artists would not be attended to, would not be addressed. People may want to donate, contribute, help, but how would they know if those stories are not brought to the fore? There is a question that I see my colleague Arjo is asking, saying the Tablighi Jamaat incident in Delhi and its effect has been widely publicized and demonized by the media. As far as the effect of the media has on the common man, what steps can the media take to ensure the COVID-19 issue does not turn into a communal one? Arjo, I don't want to sit out here and act the jury on media. I think we all have slowly realized that the only way to be able to steer clear from this kind of narrative is to have self-censorship, and to absorb and not absorb what's coming in. It's very difficult to police what's going on, because the narrative is so strong and the narrative is being taken away. And I think it's important that we do call out the bluff, we do point out, but how much will you point out? Because yesterday I saw one of my former colleagues on television spewing venom at another issue after the Tablighi Jamaat. I mean, talking about how students in madrasas are hiding and probably carriers or whatever. And he was heavily trolled. He was told, but it didn't affect him. He says trolls are now like water on our backs. So what steps can the media take? The media, of course, I think, I mean, itself has to do self-censorship, but there is nothing called the media because there are so many forms of media. Everybody now has, it's so become so democratic that everybody can really have their own opinion and broadcast their own opinion. I think it depends now on each one of us of what to be to share, to forward. I think that sharing and forward should be very restricted, should be very, very censored as in self-censorship, don't censor others. But there is nothing much that we can do at this point of time, but just to be able to be conscious and aware and tell our groups, friends groups, family groups, that this piece of news is wrong, or don't forward this piece of news. This is communal, this is racist. Please don't indulge in this kind of narrative. I think that's what I could do. And I'd like to take more questions now. Or should we take a poll right now to say that, was this session useful for students who are trying to decide what to do, or for journalists who are confused of whether they are doing the right thing? Because it's easy. Self-doubt is something that accompanies a journalist, a writer, artist all their life. And I think self-doubt is important. So is there any other questions that that you can get? Please come up with questions. We can do a poll as well. Ashish, do you want to do a poll, or do you want to take more questions?
No, sir. So we'll take the question. There's one student who is asking that what would be the COVID-19 impact on our public health system. So if you can talk about that. And he's also concerned about the future investment in India.
The impact of COVID on the public health system, I think is twofold. I mean, I'm not a public health expert really, but twofold as I understand is that I think it's a huge awakening to realize that our public health infrastructure is pathetic to begin with, and we are not crisis ready, we are not disaster prepared, and I think it's really time that we get that act together. And if we could, as a country of 1.3 billion people, if we could handle the polio, there is no reason why we can't handle other diseases and the healthcare system. The healthcare system just needs to be revamped, and it requires sincere people. It requires intent and sincerity. I think we have the resources. The immediate impact, the negative impact, the positive impact I told you is that I think going ahead, we are going to have a much more robust infrastructure in many areas. I'm not saying it's going to be across the country. It's too large a country, too divided, too difficult, but in many areas, it is going to be robust. The negative impact is that a lot of healthcare, we may lose a lot of healthcare workers because we do not even have safety gears for healthcare workers. We are expecting our healthcare workers to go out there to help, to give care, to provide care, but we are not taking care of them. Yesterday, I'm told that in Bhopal, 2 doctors from All India Medical Institute of Sciences in Delhi, who were deputed, sent out there for the crisis, and were staying in a makeshift accommodation provided to them. They went out to fetch milk, and the police beat them up. And they kept saying that we are doctors, and still they were beaten up for stepping out. Now, if that is how we are going to treat our healthcare workers, in many areas of the country, we are getting stories of healthcare workers and their families being ostracized by the apartment and the society people. because saying that they are carriers and we should stay away from them. Now, if that is the attitude, we need to change the attitude. So that is the negative impact. The negative impact is that we may lose a lot of healthcare workers. We need a healthcare equipment, safety equipment immediately. Your second part of your question is about the economic fallout is going to be absolutely unprecedented. I just now, showed you the pictures of these 400 million people, and they are right now without jobs. So there are 400 million people at least without jobs in this country. Many more. We know that across the world, many more people have lost their jobs. They're losing their jobs. It is going to be the trickle-down effect, an impact economists are still, and it's going to take a long time for them to even get a handle over what you are asking. We have no idea how bad and how big this catastrophe is. And in the front line, who's in the front line? The healthcare worker, the public policy people, the infrastructure workers, and the journalists. The journalists will have to bring back these stories. They have to be there. The journalists, remember, when there's a war going on, the only civilians there who don't have, except for a bulletproof jacket, they're not carrying anything else. There's no other immunity that they have. They go to the edges of human misery to bring back the stories. Why? Why do they do that? Not because it's fun. It's not fun to get your leg blown up in a landmine. They do that because they just hope that maybe that story will shake up the collective conscience of humanity, of people. And maybe that will become an anti-war story, an anti-war photograph. And that's why war photographers, war journalists risk their lives, go to wars. And I think we are in a war. This is a different kind of a war. It is a war. And in this war, we need many more people. And we need many more young people to come up, take up this profession, learn how to handle crisis, how to face crisis, how to tell stories. In whichever profession you may not end up being a journalist, but you'll still be able to use this experience, use this exposure, use this training. Because one thing I can say, and I'm saying it with responsibility, and as a journalist should be, I will not retract this. I stand for with what I'm saying, that this is perhaps the best journalism course, journalism and humanities course that you can get anywhere. And I'm not saying this to sell the school. I am saying this because I believe in it. And you heard students talk about it. But we need you to come. I mean, I can't be teaching an empty class. I need you to fill up my class. So I welcome all of you out here, whoever is interested, to get in touch, come, join our school. You will have a lot of takeaways.
So, Professor, we have a similar question. We have a similar question to what you're talking, that what is the criteria you look in a student for selecting a student in your school? And also, will the students be able to work on live projects with the faculties once they join?
What is the first part of your question, Ashish, again?
So first part is what are the criteria, what are the skills you are looking in a student for you to select them in your school?
So the criteria, I mean, of course, Ashish and Chinky will tell you the websites will give you the criteria. We have a common admission test, which is the JSAT, and then we look for a minimum grade in your school living examination, which seems in a different phase right now. And then of course we have a statement of purpose. And then we have an interview. I personally think that yes, the scores are important, but there may be a bad hair day. You may have ended up with a score that you didn't expect, but you have the knack for it. I want a statement of purpose which I cannot refuse. I want to speak to you and listen to that story that you tell me, why you want to be a journalist, why you want to do that. And that is my way of selecting a student. When I was at NDTV, and we used to recruit young people. And there are young people who were recruited there who are teaching today in our school as well. And in that recruitment, the only thing that I would look in a person, because it wouldn't matter to me where they came from which discipline they came from. What was their level of education was also not important to me. What I wanted to see was whether they have loads of common sense. I want common sense. You know the cliche, right? That common sense is very uncommon. Now that's a cliche, but cliches sometimes carry the truth. So I look for people with common sense. I look people with proficiency in spoken and written English. This is an English language course, but if you are bilingual, trilingual, multilingual, it's even better, because the world is going to look for that. I want you to have that absolute passion to be able to make the difference. Make a difference. That passion, if you have, I think you fill the criteria. What is the second part, Ashish?
So second part is that will the students be working on live projects with faculties?
Well, there is, you heard Ashima sometime back. Ashima was on a live project with one of the faculty members called Josie Joseph, who is one of India's foremost investigative journalists, was the national editor for Times of India and of Hindu, and started a startup of international, hard-hitting documentary investigative films with Adrian Levy, the Guardian journalist, and Ashima was co-opted by Josie on a live project on researching the Rohingyas. And that's how Ashima actually traveled across the country to Hyderabad, Jammu, and Delhi, tracking the Rohingyas, because that's a film that they are making. So yes, you are going to be associated with live projects. I am currently in the process of editing my fourth book, which is on citizenship, identity, and nationality. A book being published by Orient Black Swan, an academic publisher, and there are at least 5 students from different schools in the university who have been associated with me while researching the book, and they go down to the ground to research the book. There is a annual festival that I curate at the India International Center called the Art East Festival, and students have out there not just interned, but they have also participated in a way where they have exhibited. They've set up installations, stuff that they've never done before, in gallery where it would take you a long time to get a space. So yes, the answer is yes, you will get to do live projects, and projects which are not just the school magazine or the university brochure, but important international projects that you're going to be associated with. I can see one more question.
Professor, we have one more question.
Pardon?
Yeah, what are the career options? What are the career options a student can take apart from journalism?
Well, Chinky, thank you for the question. When I did my master's in actually English literature, because those days we didn't have many journalism schools. There was no undergraduate journalism schools to go to. I didn't know what to do. So my first job, I actually became a lecturer of English literature in a university. Then I said, no, I want to be an artist. So I went off to Bombay. I started painting, and I joined advertising, and then I became a journalist. So it was accidental perhaps. But today, the scene is different. Every organization, public, private, quasi-government, on a lighter note, even the underground, every organization across the world on this planet has to have a communication office. A degree like this makes you absolutely future ready for a communication role. What does the communication professional do? They frame a story, they tell a story, and they tell a story in a way that it impacts. It could be, you could be on either side of the fence, but you still have to write well, you have to speak well, you have to analyze, you have to be coherent. You should be able to put together images and text. It is a multimedia world. It is no longer a text. You can't say that I'm just going to be a print journalist or I'm just going to be a television journalist. That doesn't work. We do things on our own. My former colleague, who's no longer, who was one of the prime time first stars of television and Indian media today, does runs a a social media channel called Mojo, and she's doing a absolutely incredible work during the COVID. She's one of the journalists actually going down to the ground behind every alley to bring back stories. So there are various career opportunities, from being a hardcore journalist or reporter, working backroom in the production. It could be on a website, but it also could be in a communication office of NASA. It could be the communication office of the Parliament or the Prime Minister's office or of OP Jindal Global University. Every organization has communication. Communication is the key. Communication is the king. And it is going to be, like I said, that the information warfare. Now, if you look at the positive side of information warfare, you are part of that now. We are all part of that. You are carrying information. We all carry information. So career opportunity, I think, and I'm not exaggerating, I think this has the largest array of career opportunities. I can see many more questions out here. I can see someone called Subhamay Bhattacharya, whom I knew. Subhamay was a photographer in Guwahati. He works with the Wildlife Trust of India. And he says, what's your take on the photojournalists who are documenting the present day crisis? I mean, what to be focused, published immediately, and what to be stored back for the right time to respond to different medium or publications or a long time work. I think, Subhamay, you have been in the profession long enough. I think there are stories which can wait to be told, and I think those are the stories that you need to store, which you need to archive, keep it with them. Remember, we used to go for these long drives, and there were stories which we didn't have to report then, but we would stop, pick up the story, take a few pictures, video, keep it with us to be able to share it at some other day. But right now, I think you need to tell the stories of people who are being disadvantaged, senior citizens, healthcare workers, refugees, migrant workers, every category and every section of citizenry who are being disadvantaged. I think those are the stories, Subhamay, that we are waiting to hear from you. These are those pictures. You need to bring home those pictures so that the government can be made to sit up and made to act. I think that is going to be most important. Aditi is asking how COVID-19 is affecting the vulnerable class, especially the homeless people. Aditi, that's what I told you. It is not just affecting the vulnerable class, it's almost killing them. It is one of the greatest catastrophes that we are witnessing. But as a journalism student or as a citizen, as a conscious citizen, it's not just good enough to say that we are witnessing. We should be able to do something. What can we do? What should we do? We should be able to bring those stories, share those stories in the most effective medium that you think. These mediums are in your hand. We should be able to. Yesterday, I tweeted to the Calcutta police because I wanted help to reach my parents who are 90 years old, and they are alone without any help. And the police responded within a few seconds. I mean, the help it took many hours really to figure out things, but still there is a method and means of responding. Kirti is asking a question: how do you ensure that your work has impact on the viewers? Kirti, it's not always that you can ensure. Of the several hundreds of stories that I have done, I can only say that maybe a couple of dozen of stories have had impact. But we report, we tell those stories with the hope that it will have an impact. Today, more than my times, the chance of an impact is far more, because your politicians, your policymakers, the policemen, etc., everyone is on social media. You can reach them. And I think that is important. You should be able to reach them, or your reach to them is much better. So, but if you have a compelling story, even if they don't react, the world will react, the people will react. When people react, when there is a trickle down impact, that impact is going to, make sure that it is that they wake up. So the impact on the viewers is how honestly, how sincerely, how compellingly you tell each story. And every story is not going to be compelling, but that doesn't mean we stop telling the story. Joanne is asked a question, Reha Paul, how would the political situation of the world change after COVID-19? Will the impact create a positive enough change to cause the livelihood of people better or more equity? I am so happy you're asking these very interesting, very bright questions. Will the world change? Honestly, I don't think it's going to change. Honestly, I don't think human beings change so soon. Public memory is very short, but a lot of things will change. Will it have a positive enough impact to change, cause livelihood of people? Again, sincere and honest answer, no, it's not going to change. It's going to take a long time before change comes. But we don't give up. We work, we live with the hope that we can change. And the only positivity is that so many of you asking these questions itself is a change. 20 years ago, a young person would not have asked this question. We are today much more aware. We are today much more, we want to change. We want to change the world, and we think that we can. Despite the almost hopelessness, there is a certain hope. And I think we live for that. Adhiraj Singh is asking, how should the whole world ideally restart its functioning after the end of COVID-19 pandemic? I don't know. There are no easy answers, but I think the most logical and the way it's going to restart is going to be a staggered restart. So it's not going to be a restart button that you press and everything's going to open up. Each area is going to open up slowly. Each sector is going to open up slowly, because now it's not just no longer just about saving lives, but you have to save livelihoods. And I think yesterday the Prime Minister's office did hint that yes, it is not just good enough to save lives, it's also going to be about saving livelihood. So it's going to be life and livelihood, slowly and steadily, that restart, but no restart button really. Anuragini Gohai Barua, 12th grade student from DPS Guwahati. Could you tell about how journalists deal with spread of fake news on WhatsApp and other social media? Anuragini, I know your school. My daughter studied there for the first few years before we moved to Delhi, and then she moved to Delhi. So I did go to that school to drop her a couple of times. How do journalists spread of fake news? Is every time you see a news, cross-check. If you find it fake, tell that group that this is fake. Delete it immediately. Do not forward. So I think this constant, that becomes your skin, your second skin. You will have to call out the bluff. You have to call out the lie. It is your responsibility. If you are part of several WhatsApp groups, you become the watchdog. Journalists are watchdogs. So you cross-check. And how do you cross-check? It's a simple rule in journalism. Cross-check once, cross-check twice, cross-check thrice. Okay, cross-check once, twice, thrice. 3 checks are required before you let out an information. You should be first and you should be right, but it's okay to be second to give out the information as long as you're right. You should never retract. How often journalists group to focus on a big story versus a small story, a localized story, and positive versus negative story? Manjushri Palit out here, my colleague, asked this question. How often are journalists grouped to focus on a big story versus a small story? No, Manjushri, we are not told about big stories and small stories. We run for stories. I remember I had put a target to myself that I will do 3 stories a week. So there were days when there were no stories. I couldn't find the story. I couldn't find the story to tell. And I would be extremely frustrated and negative at the end of it. And I would say, all right, tomorrow I'm going to do a story. And the next day I would go and I wouldn't find the story. Not a good enough, not a compelling, strong story to be able to take it on a 9 o'clock bulletin. And I would be crestfallen. So I decided on two kinds of stories, the story and the bread and butter story. So I would do a bread and butter story, which would ensure that I retain my job, that they wouldn't say, oh, he's not done a story for 10 days. And there was the story that would have to happen. I can't create a story, right? The stories are there, but it's not so easy to just go out on the road and find